by thanking the Interparliamentary Union for organizing this important event today. Uh, I would like to extend my greetings to President of the General Assembly, uh, His Excellency Volkan Bozkir, as well as to the President of the Interparliamentary Union, Guevas. Um, Excellencies, distinguished parliamentarians, the preceding presentations offer illuminating insights into the complex and myriad challenges confronting the international community. At the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, these are clear and compelling voices for multilateral cooperation. The United Nations is at the core of such international cooperation. The United Nations is, in fact, a world, our world in a microcosm. In many ways, it is not dissimilar to our national parliaments. Like them, this Parliament of Man is guided by the quest for consensus building and compromise. Its outcomes are often far from perfect. This, the inadequacies of the national parliamentary systems do not imply that democratic institutions of inclusive and participatory governance should be disbanded. Instead, they must be strengthened. Likewise, the perceived failings of the United Nations system cannot be construed as an invalidation of the multilateral order. Rather, it is a call to reform and reinvigorate it. To this end, I believe the following steps are important. One, the General Assembly is the most representative organ of the United Nations. It should have the strongest voice in the decision-making processes. The General Assembly cannot be revitalized without addressing the growing imbalance in the relationship with the Security Council. The relationship between the two principal organs is based on the principles of representation and accountability. In discharge of its primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, the Security Council, acts on behalf of the UN member states. The Council, in turn, is accountable to the entire membership represented in the General Assembly. Over time, this relationship has become distant and tenuous and grossly imbalanced. The Council's deliberations and actions neither reflect the interests of the broader UN membership, nor does it consider itself accountable to them. This was epitomized yet again in the ritualistic annual report of the Security Council submitted to the General Assembly this year. Meanwhile, the Council continues to encroach on the mandates of the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council. While the need for a comprehensive reform of the Security Council cannot be overemphasized, this reform should be guided by the immutable principles and purposes of the Charter and not by great power politics or the national ambitions of a handful of member states. Such reform must strengthen democracy and equality, not erode it further. Two, the United Nations Charter places equal emphasis on promoting international peace and security, as well as economic and social advancement of all peoples. The Charter's purpose of promoting, quote, social progress and better standards of life in larger freedoms was inspired by the firm conviction that the quest for global peace and prosperity are interlinked and mutually reinforcing. The goal of international economic cooperation can be best realized by enabling the Economic and Social Council to fulfill the policy and coordination mandate which has been assigned to it by the Charter. What is needed is not to restructure the existing global economic architecture, as some have advocated, but instead to reorient it according to towards the vision and the purposes of the UN Charter. Three, the United Nations must enhance its engagement with, quote, we the people across the world. Here, I must compliment my sister, Ambassador Alia Al Thani of Qatar, who, along with Ambassador Anna Karin of Sweden, ably navigated divergent views and interests of member states to negotiate the UN 75 declaration, which is comprehensive, compact, and comprehensible, a rare mix in otherwise verbose UN documents. This process was informed and enriched by the largest ever global conversation by the United Nations as part of the Secretary General's UN 75 initiative. The recently held ECOSOC Youth Forum was also instructive in bringing the perspective of youth to the table. The IPU has also been a consistent and prominent presence in these discussions. For the priorities of we the people must remain the bedrock in guiding the work of the United Nations. At the 75th anniversary of our organization, there is no bigger challenge than the COVID 19 pandemic. At the same time, there is no greater cause for multilateral cooperation than to contain its deleterious impacts, especially on the developing countries. The pandemic threatens to derail the realization of Agenda 2030 and the SDGs and accentuate the existential threat of climate catastrophe. The United Nations must play a central role in confronting these simultaneous global challenges. There must be synergy between our responses to the health, development, and climate challenges. This is implied in the Secretary General's call to, quote, build back better, unquote. Excellencies, dear colleagues, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Utant, once stated, I quote, the failure of the United Nations is the failure of the human community. The UN will be as strong or as weak as its member states wish it to be, unquote. The world's parliamentarians are not only repositories of the people's trust in their countries, they are also representatives of the collective conscience of the human community. They have a vital role to play in upholding the UN based multilateral order. They should refuse to grant parliamentary legitimacy to any action that violates international law and the fundamental principles of the UN Charter, or which reneges on international commitments of member states or promotes unilateral policies that defy and deny multilateral cooperation. It is reassuring, therefore, that the declaration of the Fifth World Conference of Speakers of Parliament has reaffirmed the unequivocal resolve of parliaments worldwide to, and I quote, lead by example in defending multilateralism, unquote, and to firmly stand up for the, I quote, international system built around the United Nations, unquote. This clear commitment must be followed through in letter and spirit. A global order firmly anchored in the principles and purposes of the UN Charter is the only guarantee that international obligations in peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights will be upheld in a consistent and uniform manner. This is vital for our existence and for the future of our children and their children. I thank you very much.